Lecture 24, Limits to Markets. In our previous lecture, we looked at externalities, and externalities is a form of market failure. But this is only one type of market failure. In this lecture, we will be looking at other ways in which markets fail to provide efficient allocations of a good, and also we will be looking at reasons as to why markets don't exist for certain goods and services. Let's begin at taking a look at a diagram that we have seen before that outlines different types of goods based on their characteristics. Non-rival and non-excludable goods. In particular, let us look at the second column, second row. So we are looking at a good that is both non-rival and non-excludable, and such a good is called a pure public good or a pure public bad. For instance, a lunar eclipse is a public good, and air pollution would be considered a public bad. Goods can be classified as rival, meaning one person's use reduces others' use, or non-rival, meaning one person's use does not reduce others' use. Goods can also be classified as excludable, meaning people can be excluded from using the good, and also non-excludable, where people cannot be excluded from using the good. A public good is both non-rival and non-excludable, meaning that one person's use does not reduce another person's use, and people cannot be excluding from using the good. The main idea behind a public good is that if it can be provided for one person to consume, then it can be provided for all other persons to be consumed at no additional cost. Again, think about a lunar eclipse or national defense. These are goods that once they are provided, all persons can consume the good without any additional cost. A goods type depends both on its characteristics as well as economic institutions. For example, knowledge is a non-excludable public good. However, when it is subject to intellectual property rights, it is being made into a public good that is artificially scarce. A common pasture is a common pool resource. But what if a fence is put around this pasture? This now becomes a private good. So institutions help in determining the type of good. So a good that is originally a common pool resource can be turned into a private good based on economic institutions. Markets allocate private goods well, but they allocate other types of goods poorly. When goods are non-rival, the marginal cost and the efficient price is zero. If you were a person in the market providing this good, would you want to provide a good at a price of zero? Alternatively, when goods are non-excludable, there is no way to charge a price for them. Would you want to provide such a good? The market will not provide efficient levels of non-rival or non-excludable goods without subsidies. And that is why a lot of times we will have the government providing goods that have these two characteristics. So for instance, roads. The government will provide roads because the market will not provide the efficient amount of roads. Non-rival and non-excludable good. So here are some examples of market failures and remedies. For instance, you take an international flight. When you take this flight, there's going to be an increase in global carbon emissions. There's a private benefit to you from taking the flight to get to where you want to go. However, there is an external cost to taking that flight. The market failure is the overuse of air travel. Because individuals don't take into consideration the impact of their actions on others, we will have an overuse of air travel. Possible remedies include taxes and quotas, so there could be a tax on airplane tickets. This international flight that you have taken is a public bad, and it has a negative external impact. Traveling by car or investing in R&D are other examples of non-rival and non-excludable good, where investing in R&D is a public good and has a positive external effect. Traveling by car, it has a negative external effect. Moral hazard and adverse selection. Markets can fail because of moral hazard and adverse selection. Contracts are necessarily incomplete when important information about an interaction is unavailable or unverifiable. We call this asymmetric information. So information is asymmetric when one party knows something the other does not. Hidden actions cause moral hazard when one person's actions affect the profit or well-being of another. So if your actions are hidden, it will cause moral hazard if that hidden action impacts the well-being of someone else. For instance, workers' effort, insured person's risk. Hidden attributes cause adverse selection when the terms of exchange cause some people to drop out of the market. A common example is insurance. So you will find that mainly sick people buy insurance. This is because other persons drop out of the market. Other persons who are not sick tend to drop out of the market. So a sick person knows more about the state of their health than the person who is selling insurance. When they go to buy insurance, they hide this information, and this impacts the company's profits. Companies tend to increase the price of insurance because they know that this is occurring. What that does is it excludes persons who are sick from the insurance market. So persons who are not sick will not buy insurance because the price of insurance is too high. And this situation was created because of asymmetric information. Other examples include the used car market, and as I said, health insurance market, and also credit market. When you go to get credit, you have more information about the viability of your business than the person who is giving you credit. When you hide this information from the person who is giving you credit, this may in turn impact the profit of that person who is giving you credit. As a result, you might find interest rates increasing. This will cause certain persons from dropping out of the market. The market for lemons. Consider a simple model of market for used cars. Every day, 10 owners consider selling their car. The quality of each car is 0 to 9,000. Buyers are willing to pay the true value of the car, and sellers are willing to accept half the true value. The potential gains from trade is half the value of each car. But suppose information is asymmetric, meaning one person has more information than the other. In this scenario, who do you think will have more information? Sellers know the quality of their own car. Buyers do not know the quality of individual cars. Buyers only know the average quality of cars sold yesterday. If the average quality of cars sold yesterday was 4,500, then today the buyers will be willing to pay 4,500 for any car. Every car is put on the market except the car worth $9,000. The average quality of cars is 4,000. Tomorrow, the average quality of cars sold will be 3,500, and the next week, only the car worth $0 will be on the market, hence the market for lemons. So in this scenario, because buyers only know the average quality of cars based on the cars sold yesterday, this will drive down the price that buyers are willing to pay for a car. So if you know that your car is worth $9,000, you will not put your car on the market. So we will find a situation where very good quality cars are not being sold in the market, and instead we only have lower quality cars being sold in the market. This is based on the fact that buyers know less about the used car being sold than the sellers of the car. This is an example of a market for lemons. And this is a market failure. So asymmetric information is another type of market failure. The market for health insurance. Adverse selection poses a serious problem for health insurance. People are more likely to purchase health insurance if they are ill, and this information is asymmetric. As such, insurance companies raise prices to maintain profitability, and this leads to adverse selection, with more healthy individuals dropping insurance. Insurance companies further raise prices, and this cycle continues. What policies can limit this adverse selection? Compulsory enrollment in private insurance, such as the now defunct individual mandate under the Affordable Care Act. So if there is a compulsory enrollment in private insurance for individuals, then this policy may limit the adverse selection where only sick people buy insurance. Because if everyone is required to buy insurance, then both sick people and people who are well will buy insurance. Another policy is universal tax finance coverage like Medicare for all. So these are just some policies that are able to limit adverse selection. Insurance can also create a moral hazard. And just backing up to that moral hazard is a situation where persons who are insured will take part in more risky behavior. So if you know that you already have insurance, then you think that you don't need to protect yourself as much. This is moral hazard, and it's another type of market failure. Here we have some examples of market failures, in particular asymmetric information and their remedies. So the third type of asymmetric information with market failure is someone who has purchased car insurance decide how carefully to drive. Prudent driving contributes to insurance companies' profit. There's a private cost, but there is an external benefit. So there's a private cost to buying insurance. However, when you drive more prudently, the insurance companies also benefit in terms of increased profits, and this is an external benefit. Too little insurance is usually offered, and insurance premiums are too high. This is a market failure. Installing driving monitoring device could be a possible remedy. So if you know that if an insurance company decides to install a driver monitoring device, then they may be able to control that risky behavior that drivers usually engage in when they have purchased insurance. The terms applied to this type of market failure is missing markets, or, as I said before, moral hazard. Limits to markets. We have looked at scenarios where markets actually do exist, but there are failures within these markets. We have also looked at remedies for these market failures. But sometimes markets don't exist for certain goods and services. Reasons for these are that goods are allocated by markets as well as firms, families, and governments, and competition determines the balance between markets and firms. Firms constantly decide whether to buy it or to make it, and firms go out of business if they rely excessively on either central control or decentralized markets. Citizens also choose to allocate some goods through families or government. Limit repugnant markets that violate ethical norms or undermine the dignity of buyers and sellers, and provide merit goods that should be available to people regardless of their ability or willingness to pay. So the repugnant markets and the merit goods are two of the major reasons for the non-existence of certain markets. So I will throw out a few examples. The market for organs. Why is there no market for organs? This is because the selling or the buying of organs is seen as repugnant. This, in other words, would violate ethical norms, and citizens choose not to engage in such a market. Merit goods are goods that people think should be available to everyone. For instance, a certain level of healthcare or education. People believe that these should be available to everyone, and so their markets for these don't usually exist. Repugnant markets. Recall the competitive equilibrium in the bread market. Imagine this were instead a legal market for human kidneys. Why does the demand curve slope down, and why does the supply curve slope up? As we said before, the supply curve slopes up because as price increases, the quantity that suppliers are willing to sell also increases. The demand curve slopes down because as price increases, the quantity demanded by consumers decreases. What is a competitive equilibrium? The equilibrium is where supply meets demand. Would this be a good institution that is efficient and fair? Would this market for human kidneys be a good institution? Is it efficient? Is it fair? What are your thoughts on this? The logic for allocating private goods through competitive markets is compelling. However, many people believe that some things should not be bought or sold on markets. Human organs is one of those things that people think should not be bought or sold on markets. Alvin Roth calls these repugnant markets and has helped develop non-market mechanisms for matching organ donors with patients. Which markets for private goods do you think are or would be repugnant? Kids or parents, a market for kids or parents, do you think that would be repugnant? What about vote buying or vote selling? Do you think a market for votes would be repugnant? Grades, sex. What are your thoughts on these? Would markets for these as private goods be repugnant? Merit goods. Merit goods are the goods that should be made available to all people regardless of willingness to pay. Goods that are ostensibly provided to everyone in the US include K-12 schooling, trial by jury, police and fire protection. What other goods should be merit goods? And what goods provided to everyone would be better allocated by markets? Police and fire protection, do you think that those goods would be better allocated by markets? What about K-12 schooling? Do you think the provision of K-12 schooling should be dependent on a person's willingness to pay? How do we mitigate the failures in these markets? Markets generate efficient equilibria when contracts are complete, firms are price takers, transactions have no external effects. However, competitive markets with complete contracts and no externalities can generate unfair outcomes, and these are usually in the case of repugnant markets and also merit goods. Governments and families have a role to play in mitigating these market failures. This is why we usually see the government provision of certain goods, for instance, merit goods, and we also see that the provision of organs are not determined by a market, but are instead determined by families or just by the goodwill of persons.